of us over here are fans of Ashwath Damodaran. So wanted to know how was your experience overall NYU's turn and also learning valuation or maybe corporate finance from him.
NYU, as all of you know, is the holy Makkah of finance, right? It's the ultimate grail for finance. And as you rightly said, Ashwath Damodaran is the god of finance in that holy Makkah, right? As people in Wall Street like to say, Wall Street stops and listens when Ashwath Damodaran speaks. When we study in India, we feel, we need to do our engineering, now we need to do our MS or MBA. But MBA is a very different animal, right? And because I've done MS and MBA, I can sort of articulate between the two. MS is when you are specializing in a specific subject, right? MBA is when you're generalizing and trying to understand the management of a company, right? It's very different. So if you want to do MBA, and especially in a global college, or you want to do it outside India, you want to do it after you have spent at least 8 to 10 years in the industry.
Often see students who perform very well academically but struggle in interviews. So in your experience, what are the top skills that actually help someone get hired? Anything in your mind?
In fact, to this point, I would like to highlight and take back a program we used to have in NYU. And in fact, this was identified, I think, a couple of years before this program started. They called it the Career Acceleration Program, or the CAP. So CAP, what it did was, it identified that, okay, there are a lot of students, to your point, who are great in academics, who score great, who get grade A's and grade A plus in their subjects, but they are flunking the interviews, right?
Yeah.
And they realized that, okay, this is happening quite frequently. And this they determined almost a decade back. What they did in this course was, one, they started doing mock interviews, right? Because many a times a person is exposed to the kind of questions in that industry for the very first time in that interview, right? He is completely unaware of, okay, what questions are they going to ask, right? Starting from there. So one, they started doing mock interviews with people in that domain. So for example, a person who wants to get into buy-side consulting or buy-side research, they are exposed to that buy-side of things, right? People who want to get into the sell side of things, they're exposed to the sell side of things. People who don't want to do that, want to get into management consulting, they're exposed to that side of things. And NYU had the advantage of, bringing in alumni from these different fields, and you get a chance to sort of interact with them. That was number one. Right? Second was interactions with people who are living in that space, right? Many a time, as people like even me, right? When I got out and when I started, if I go back to my engineering days, I felt engineering was very, swanky. I'm going to have like a cool cabin. I'm going to do a lot of cutting stuff. But it's very different when you get into the actual job of it. So it helps when you connect with industry veterans, especially like, for example, you want to get into head side, or you want to get into investment banking, or you want to get into management consulting. It always helps to spend some time with that. And what we used to do we used to do it in a structured manner. We used to have coffee chats, or we used to have these coffee interviews where people used to go and spend a day with them. And they understand, okay, this is what you do in management consulting. And at that time, many people will feel, hey, this is not what I want to do. Right? I'm not enjoying this. And you can, in fact, take a step back and maybe choose a different field. Because that exposure lets you do that. And third and most important skill set, which I feel is lacking in a lot of students today, is interpersonal communication. Right? In interview, the way you articulate yourself, the way you present what you have already achieved matters more than what's on the paper. Right? You might have achieved the greatest grades and you are great in academics and you must have managed some few clubs. But if you are not able to articulate that in the interview, which is just half an hour or maybe an hour, you will lose the interview. Right? So right from the moment you walk into the interview, I've seen, like even in my company, people are not dressed appropriately. These things matter. Right? If you are coming in for a finance position and you're not dressed like an executive, people start judging you. Right? Your confidence when you're shaking, even from the moment you shake your hand, like how are you giving me the grip? Is your grip firm? Are you sort of breaking my knuckles? Or are you giving me a confident shake? Are you making eye contact? So all of these things are very important. In fact, we had a program where we used to record people from the moment they walked into the room.
Which should be very helpful, I think.
Which we can simulate, right? It can be done, right? All of these interview skills you can take anywhere between 2-3 days or 4 days max, I would say. And all of this can be taught. But all of this is very soft skills. So this is not something that, we can sit behind a machine and teach. It's something that you need to bring people into a room and you need to start observing people, how they interact with seniors, right? And that's what gives them confidence. Once you boost that confidence, the interviews and the job offers follow.
Correct. Absolutely. True. So certainly when you scan a fresher's CV, let's say you're scanning a fresher's CV, what immediately catches your attention? And on the flip side, what are the biggest resume mistakes that reduce a candidate's chances of getting a job?
I think personally, if you ask me, I see the fitment to the job, okay, or the fitment to the department, right? That's number one. And for that, I will scan, okay, what are his technical skills? How has he written the resume, or how has he structured his resume? And I'm a fan of structuring, right? I come from management
Correct.
consulting, so I like structured resumes. When I feel that people have written too many things all over the place, the person loses, right? And
Correct. So it shouldn't be
it
messy.
shouldn't be messy. That's number one, right? And there are a lot of different formats to structure your resume today. And with the world of AI, you will get a lot of different inputs doing that, right? But to
True.
structure it, like say for example, you're applying from an engineering background, and you apply to a product company, and your resume looks like a marketing resume. They're not going to like
Correct.
it, right? At the same time, you apply to a marketing company, but your resume looks very, traditional. They're not going to like it, right? So
Correct.
you need to see one, how your resume fits in the culture of that company, right? Two, whether the job that you're applying for, do you have those skill set? It always helps to see, for example, Salesforce professionals, right? People who are into sales. If the
Correct.
person has some amount of exposure to sales tools that they use on a daily basis, like SFD, we
Hmm.
had Thor in Capgemini, right? So the different tools, like even exposure or even talking about those tools that I use in my, day to day, tells me that
Hmm.
this candidate is ahead of other candidates. And number one and number two and number three, most important thing is for people to avoid grammatical mistakes. I see that far too often, and that's something that really, misses the catch over there, because they should make it a point to sort of run the resumes through a spell check, through a grammar check, and
Correct.
use those elements to sort of polish your resume, and also see how you can closely align yourself not to the position you're applying today, but to the position that it might evolve into 2 years from now. That's what shows maturity.
As in, could you expand
So for
on?
example, if you're a fresher, but you
Hmm.
know that you are applying to an XYZ research firm that
Hmm.
values a lot of the skill sets with people who are in that position for 2 years or 3 years. So what it helps you
Hmm.
do is go and look at people who are requesting or applying to that same company, but in a senior profile. So for example, if you're
Okay.
applying as a consultant, look at job descriptions of a senior consultant. And that is very readily
Hmm.
available, right? If you can start
Nice. Nice.
incorporating that,
Correct.
you have already positioned yourself differently from the crowd.
So, see, many people hear the term strategy consulting but do not understand the day-to-day reality. So, could you tell us how does a day look like in the life of a strategy consultant?
Sure, sure. To simplify strategy consulting, I know strategy is an overabused word today. Right? You have tech strategy, you have AI strategy, you have data strategy, you have strategy being used everywhere. Right. But if I were to step back from that and to very simply explain strategy in one word, think of strategy as the brain in your body. So if I were to draw an analogy, what does the brain do? The brain tells you what you're looking at, what you're eating, where you need to go, where you need to walk, right? Your brain is powering your whole body. But at
Yeah.
the same time, you have a nose, you have a mouth, you have hands, you have legs to complete those functions. The brain in itself cannot complete those functions. It's just giving you instructions, right? So strategy in a company does the same thing, right? Strategy sits at the brain of the company. But at the same time, you need those functions. You need your sales, right? Like your left and the
Hmm.
right hand to go and approach the customers. You need your technical developers to keep polishing the product and keep releasing features that are relevant to the market, relevant to the customers. You need
Correct.
your finance, right? Literally like the heartbeat in your company to keep managing your margins, keep managing your profits, keep looking at, okay, how can I keep these profits sustainable? And do I need to venture into different regions to, keep making my stock market as attractive for the investors, right? So all of
Correct.
this needs to be done, but strategy sits in the center and acts like a brain, keeps giving it functions. And a lot of times, many people have a misnomer that they feel that a strategy is just a bunch of slides. No, strategy is not a bunch of slides. Strategy is what you do. See, I can tell you a lot of different functions on the slide. I can say, hey, go do one, then do second, then do third, and I can lay down an entire framework for you. But in the end, if you're not going to do that, that's
Correct.
not your strategy. So what you do becomes your strategy. So strategy
Absolutely.
in one word or in one statement is what you do. Many times today I see that, and I've interacted with a lot of startups as well. In my prior job with Capgemini, I was managing a $150 million innovation fund. So I ended up interacting with over 400 different startups in that span of 5 years. What I realized with almost every other startup I met, everybody wants to do everything.
Hmm.
Right? It's like, okay, I am doing one product, but I want to do that product also. I want this product also. Okay, I'm approaching customers. I want to approach the mid market. I want to approach enterprises. I want to do everything.
Correct.
And what is the flip side to that, or what hampers your growth is when you start running in all directions, you are essentially running nowhere.
No, I always had this doubt, Sarji, that there are big companies, right? HUL, ITC and all. Why would such big companies having maybe hundreds of employees in the payrolls, and I guess they can attract top talents,
Yes.
they have the bandwidth to, hire a lot of, people and employees on the payroll who are very smart. why would they go out, and contact maybe a management consulting firm for maybe a supply chain issue or something? What am I missing in this whole picture?
So, in fact, your question is causing a shift in the whole industry. Okay, so this question, in fact, comes at a very right time because you see that shift, right? And previously, what was outsourced, to your point, as management consultant, today is being insourced. So you are having
Okay.
fractional strategy guys within the company who are spending maybe 2 or 3 hours, but are on the payrolls of the company for a longer duration. Why? Because
Okay.
they realize that companies who come in and maybe spend 2 months, 6 months, or maybe a year also are not able to give them the derived value that they are expecting. Okay. So
Hmm.
what, and see, in the past, if you look at a lot of the companies, especially the exchange of information was not as fluid as it is today. If I take it even 10 years back, what Coca-Cola is doing versus what Pepsi is doing was not out there. Today it is. Right. So
Correct.
many a times companies approached management consultants, and that's when 10 years, 15 years back is when you saw the highest growth of management consultants, right?
Exactly.
McKinsey, BCG, Bain,
Bain. Correct.
EY, KPMG, all of them, right? They grew like anything. But today, if you look at that, it's either plateauing or it's going down. Why?
Hmm.
Because there is a higher demand for people who are actually implementing things. Right. And why is that happening? Because the whole industry has shifted from there. But if you take a step back and move 10 years or 15 years back, 15 years back, they wanted to understand what was happening in the markets, maybe outside India. A lot of the
Hmm.
companies did not have that exposure. Management consultants brought that outside in perspective. So that is why, they were willing to pay 10 times, 15 times the money. Second thing, many a times managers have a view and they want to drive that to the stakeholders. So management
Hmm.
consultants are brought in even to drive those pointers, because many a time what happens is when a person inside the company says, hey, we should move into Brazil, we should move into Brazil, the management does not give that too much importance. But when a McKinsey comes and says the same thing, hey, we should move into Brazil, they will feel, oh, there is some merit to it. So many times even the decisions of internal managers are driven through management consultants. Today, to your point, they are hiring a lot of consultants and they want them to spend time in the company, because the
Correct.
consultants who have spent time in the company, maybe a year or even a two, understand the company much better, understand the problems much better. And while they might have felt, hey, we have a supply chain issue, the consultant sitting in the company for 1.5 years might now say, hey, it's not a supply chain issue, it's a pricing issue. There's a product
Right.
fitment issue. And then there's a total addressable market issue as well, which we need to tackle. And by the way, our gross margins are also not doing so fine. He will end up getting, 10 different problems from that one
Problems.
consultant. So they have now
Correct.
started insourcing in a way on all of those aspects as well.
You have studied in US in India both, right?
Yes.
So what are the differences you have observed personally and professionally, having worked and lived in US and India both? And in your view, who should seriously consider building a career abroad? So what do you think?
See, if I now I'll talk in two aspects, right? Because I've had the luxury of having worked in America, in India, and Europe, right? So I can compare three different
Correct.
geographies, and now very recently, maybe some exposure to Middle East, right? What I would say is, if a person is very aggressive, right? We call them the type A personalities in management consulting or even in investment banking, right? A person is very aggressive and wants to propel his career forward and does not care about work-life balance. It makes more sense for him to go into North America, right? It will reward you for spending 18 hours, 20 hours. Okay. And the more the hours you spend, the more the money you make. That's very directly proportional, and that's how capitalism works. Right.
Correct.
But the flip side to that is most people, in fact, 9 out of 10, after doing this for even 5 years, they get drained out. I had very close friends who were performing as the top 5 traders in Goldman Sachs. You can imagine the amount of money they make. They're all burnt out. They're like, I don't want to do this trading. They got into so different fields like shrub pruning, cutting trees, something very different from what they're doing. They're making money there as well, but
Correct.
they were tired of the constant rigor.
Correct.
Flip side to India, if I look at the professional angle, if I talk about professionalism, in India, professionalism is still catching up. While we say that, okay, MNCs adopt a lot of the professionalism, we don't see that being as professional in India. We see a lot of lacking, but we are slowly catching up. I won't say we are as bad as we were 10 years ago. Today, there's a lot of more procedures in place, a lot of more processes in place. We are sort of adapting from the outside. And we are getting there, but you won't get that aggressive growth in India. Why? Because even today, whether you like it or not, a lot of the decision making still happens in America, especially if you're dealing with tech and finance, right?
Also, Middle East experience.
Middle East, to be very frank, I've not worked for more than 2 years, specifically in Middle East, but Middle East is trying to adapt a lot of the hybrid culture. So they try to, give you the remuneration that you might get in America, and they try to give you the work-life balance that you might deserve in Europe. But at the same time, if you were to compare purely on salaries, Middle East is nowhere like a North America, but they would be maybe at the lines of a Europe, and you would have similar sort of a work-life balance as you might enjoy in Europe.
Correct.
The only problem with Middle East I see is that Middle East is a very small market. So the number of opportunities and the number of jobs that you might get while you are in Middle East are limited, far less. And because it's primarily positioned as a trading company, people who have certain skill sets have higher demand compared to to the others, because Dubai, as you know, and Saudi Arabia, as you know, they primarily function as ports. So the majority of the revenue is driven in that trade. So if you're somebody who is in, say, in import export, or if you are the one who is driving the economy like construction management, those are areas that will have higher demand in the Middle East.
Fair. Also, based on our experience, what differentiates professionals who grow rapidly in their careers from those who tend to plateau after a few years?
Here again, I would say it depends on two factors. One is some people don't want to grow. Okay, they're just happy with what they want to do, right? And we see that in corporate as well, and I see that in my team as well. I'm like, okay, hey, you can do some more things and you can grow, and they're like, nahi, yaar, meko nahi karna hai. I'm happy with that, right? Yeah. So that's one category, and I'm not blaming them, right? But the second category is people who are hungry, who want to grow. Now here too, I see that certain people hit a plateau. That's because of, one is lack of networking. Second is lack of communication, and third is lack of knowledge that is required in your industry, right? While people feel that, okay, if I were to make the best presentations, or if I were to make the best Excel model, or if I were to crack the largest sales deals, I'm going to get the next title. But that's not so. There is something called as power and politics in a company, right? And that's far more real than we think. And how you manage your power, especially power up and power down, matters a lot. Right, and that's about how you maintain your relationships with not just your managers but a +2 above them, right? And how do people at that +2 perceive you? That's what actually drives your your growth in the company. If you are not able to manage your relationships either up or down, you will start seeing yourself in a plateau. Even people below, like a lot of people, especially, and I see that a lot of that problem in Indian companies. We see that people don't want to train their juniors. Okay, they feel that, okay, if I train and if I equip my junior too much, he might take away my job.
You might have,
And which is true in a way, right? But unless and until he doesn't take your job, how can you take your senior's job, right? So it's a natural progression, and that most of the people don't understand. You have to train and coach and mentor your juniors so that they can rise up to doing what you're doing today. And your leader also needs to sort of mimic or mirror that for you, so that you can rise up to the position where he is. And if that's not in the culture, you can spend 15 years and you'll still be a manager. Many times it also has to do with the culture, because you can do everything right and you still might be stuck.